We're going to continue looking at drawing and painting tools in After Effects, and this time around we're looking at the Roto Brush tool, which allows us to create transparency in video layers. And we're going to put together something like the ident that we've got in front of us. Let's get into it. I'll make a new composition, or a new project, sorry. And we'll start putting together the assets that we need. Firstly, we've got the bit of footage with the woman walking towards the camera, and I've got that on the desktop, I think, or I will shortly. I've got that from Pexels stock video. I'll give you the link to that. I'm just going to work with the like a very low res image here, because the Roto tool does take a little bit of computer memory. Be warned. Let's download this standard def or low res version and bring it into our document, our project, and import that. And let's make our composition that size, so I'm just going to drag that asset into the new composition button there, and it'll make a composition at the size and length of that video. I only want around about 3 seconds of that, so I'm going to cut, or I'm going to maybe chop it at about this point, just work on a small area, just so that you get the idea. Okay, that's a perfect amount of footage for us, and during the course of this tutorial we're going to contour that figure from the background so that we can insert other assets, you know, kind of in the background and have her in the foreground. Okay, I am going to add some text to the composition, so I'm going to grab my text tool, and the typeface I'm going to use is Politico, and I'll start with the bold version, and for lack of anything better to use, I'm just going to use Roto Brush as our text for this project. I'll make it a bit bolder, and then brush, create a bit of contrast there. That'll do us perfectly. Okay, let's pop that in position. Might need to be a bit bigger, so I'm just going to increase the scale of that. And I think I'll move all of these assets a little bit to the right there. You can see that our figure's shoulder is going to cut across the top of that text. Let's create a duplicate of that text, of that video, and we'll just turn off the top one. And in the bottom there, I'm going to create a mask. So I'll select our video, and I'm going to click and drag and add a mask to about that much of the footage, and feather that mask off. So we're going to go from video to kind of graphic over on the right hand side. So let's put a solid in the background. Oops, there's my solid settings. I'm going to click on this blue colour, match that blue colour, and pop that in the background there, so that the background is blending off into that solid. All right, so I think we've got everything in position now. Now we need to use the Roto Brush tool to separate our figure from her background. So let's do that on this layer that we've got here, and I might bring it up to the top. And we need to use the Roto Brush inside the Layers window. So we can do that by double-clicking on the layer, and it brings up that layer window. Alright, let's get a bit more space. And let's go and grab the Roto Brush. So this is the Roto Brush. It's kind of got a little man or person with a brush tool meshed together in that icon. The Roto Brush is kind of like the quick selection tool in Photoshop. It's kind of like an animated version of the quick selection tool. Let's go up a bit closer. We can use the spacebar, obviously, to navigate, and we can also use Command plus and minus to get in a bit closer if we need to. We can change the size of our Roto Brush by holding Command down on the keyboard and clicking and dragging, like so. And what we want to do is we want to select or make a sort of a rough selection of our figure using the brush tool. So let's make sure that we're at frame 1, and we'll click and drag in there and try and get a reasonable base shape that's quite close to the edges of our object that we're isolating. And I've got a pretty crappy mouse, so it's quite difficult to do. But we'll start kind of fairly far away, and then we'll come back and add more in. You can add and subtract if you hit Option. If you go over the line and you want to cut back into it, kind of maybe like so. We can see I've let go of the mouse there, and it's created this kind of purple line around my focal object, and it's gone quite close to the edge there, which is kind of good. Now it's gone over here, and I'm going to hold Option down, and I'm going to paint that out. I might even get a bit closer than that. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to get right in quite close and take the size of my brush down and paint out a few little bits and pieces like this. That's looking quite good. And alright, so I'm happy with that initial pass of the Roto tool. We've got another tool under there that we can pull down, which is the Refine Edge tool, which is a brush as well, and we can use that kind of on the hair edges or any kind of detailed edges, just to force a bit more detail into that selection. Whoops, I'm going to undo that. Holding Option down, Command down to make that a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to paint along those edges to try and pick up some of those stray hairs and whatnot. I'll do that on the other side as well. Come all the way down here, like so. And that's a pretty weird looking preview. We can turn that off by clicking on this little button here. Toggle Refine Edges X-ray button, and you can see now that our kind of edge is looking, it's looking like it's hugging tighter to those details. Okay, so now what we've got to do is work through, and this takes a little bit of time, we've got to work through each frame and just check that our Roto brush edge is hugging to the edge of our subject. Now we'll want to kind of tab through each frame, frame by frame. If you've got a full keyboard, you can use the page up and page down keys on the keyboard. If not, if you're on a laptop or you've got a smaller kind of keyboard without that kind of number pad, you can hold Command down and the left and right arrows, and that will move your timeline indicator forward and backwards through the timeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give myself a bit more space, and I'm going to keep an eye on how this edge is hugging the subject, and I'm going to move through the shot. And it's looking good at that frame. And I'm going to just keep going, and it seems to be attaching itself pretty good, which is excellent. And around about this point, it's losing a little bit of that kind of stray hair here. So I'll get the refine edge tool, and as I move through, I'm just going to paint a little bit more into that area there, like so. And that's helped it along a little bit. Alright, zooming back out and just continuing on. Now, here we're running into some problems. This does take a bit of time, so just forgive me if I rush through it a little bit. I'm going to switch back to the Roto Brush tool. And as I'm moving into this spot here with this dark elements kind of crossing over, I'm just going to keep an eye on that edge and kind of try and keep adding to it. It's quite a difficult little spot there. And so you get the idea. I might just pause the recording here and work my way through the rest of the footage, and I'll meet you back here in a couple of seconds. Okay, so now I've worked through that whole 3-second sequence of video frame by frame, and just by using the Roto brush and the refine edges brush at each frame or at each time the edge looks like it was going astray, I've now got a reasonably good selection, I suppose, around my figure. So I'm going to go back to the composition, the main composition window, and have a look at how that's worked out. And you can see that it's worked out reasonably well, actually. I can see that my character's now in front of that text, and reasonably well cut out from that background. There's a few things that I can do to alter that further, to alter my edge further. I can, and I've got my effects controls open here. I can look at my effects here, or I can also look at my effects controls in the effects control panel. I can continue to alter the feather, so I can make that edge softer, and I might just turn off that background so that we can see that edge there. You can see her moving through. A little bit dodgy down here. I knew that area was going to be difficult. Could have worked on that a little bit better. I might just render it and have a look at that. But if we forget about this area here, it's actually pretty good. Could do with a little bit of tightening on this shoulder as well. So I should have really paid greater attention to that. But I can continue to adjust the feather and the contrast. I can also shift the edge in if I want to a little bit. I can also smooth the refined edge a little bit and add a little bit more contrast to that if I want to. See that kind of added there. But for the most part, I think that rotoscope is not too bad for our purposes, in that I really just wanted her shoulder to be pushed in front of that text. It's a weird looking outline around that text that I didn't want there. Last thing I'm going to do is add a preset animation to our typography there, wherever our presets are. Here they are here. Gonna have a look at for our animate in text, and I'm going to, what should we do? Straight in by word, something like that. And let's have a look at the animator. And position. Just get the position in place, and we'll speed that up a little bit as well. Also add, finally, just a bit of motion blur onto and it's looking pretty good to me. We've certainly got a good enough alpha channel there for that text to look as if it's moving behind the character. Yeah, so that's the Roto Brush, which is kind of like Photoshop's, or the After Effects version of Photoshop's quick selection tool. It's a little bit hard and time consuming to get the hang of, but I'm sure you'll find it useful.